It's the 26th of November 1943, and the Allies have just scored a sizable victory in their bombing campaign against Germany. With a series of attacks from the sky, the Alket production capabilities have been devastated. As the smoke clears over the heavily damaged factory, it's clear that production of the much-needed Sturmgeschuetz III will be severely impacted. With production of armored vehicles, including the StuG, already insufficient to satisfy demand, a loss here, even a temporary one, is not something the German army can afford. In an effort to fill this void, new designs would emerge, including a StuG built using the Panzer IV hull. This is the story of the StuG III's often forgotten half-brother, the StuG IV. Before we get into the history of the StuG IV though, I have a special announcement. This video is sponsored by me. Check out my new online shop at ConeOfArc.store and support the channel through purchasing Kobe sets or some of the 3D printed designs which I will be adding in the near future. I made sure to get some Kobe StuG IVs to coincide with this video, so if you like learning about the tank, you can get one to add to your collection. This is something I've been looking forward to announcing for a while, and I hope you decide to check it out using the link in the description. Every order will not just come with some free stickers, but any order over $45 will get a free T-34 Tanky keychain. Alright, that's enough shilling for today. Let's get back to what you clicked on this video for. As mentioned in the intro, the Allied bombing of the Alket factory would birth the StuG IV, but the idea for it, unsurprisingly, originated prior to that event. Early in 1943, proposals for a Sturmgeschuetz on the Panzer IV chassis were briefly discussed. Unlike what the later StuG IV would become, this design took cues from the StuG IIIF for the upper portion of the superstructure. The lower portion, on the other hand, was a new design specifically tailored to a modernized Panzer IV hull being developed by Krupp at the time. This would have seen the shape of the Panzer hull change to implement sloped armor on the front, as well as strengthening the roof and bottom armor of the tank. However, despite the added benefits this could have provided, it also would have resulted in the need to transition the production process over to the new design, inevitably reducing the number built for a time. With requirements for monthly production set to increase dramatically by the end of 1943 under the Adolf Hitler program, there was no way to justify adopting this new design. As for the proposed StuG IV, it would feature 50mm of sloped frontal hull armor as well as improved side armor, with the superstructure roof being taken from the StuG IIIF. Similarly to the modernized Panzer IV, however, this design would be shelved, with Krupp stating it offered no weight savings over their new modernized Panzer IV fitted with a turret. Obviously, with this using the modernized design, it would likely have been rejected regardless due to the efforts to ramp up production. The topic of StuG production was further discussed during a conference in August, with Hitler being shown reports on the combat performance of these vehicles. Once again, the topic of a vehicle built on the Panzer IV platform would be brought up, although this time under the designation of Panzerjäger. Eventually, this would lead to the creation of the Jagdpanzer IV, but we'll come back to that in a minute. As for the StuG IV, the idea was quickly reignited in December of 1943 to try and plug the hole in StuG III production left by the Alket slowdown. Unlike the previous purpose-built design though, this was effectively just the StuG III superstructure grafted to a Panzer IV. Work began swiftly, with orders for a prototype to be ready by the 15th of December, just over a week after the decision to build StuG IVs was made, and 4 days after the memo was sent down by Krupp. Thanks to the similar design of both the Panzer III and Panzer IV, this was at least a relatively simple task. The main difference between the two vehicles was the size of the fighting compartment, with the StuG III superstructure being too short for the Panzer IV when positioned at the firewall to the engine compartment. This was only due to the position of the driver, however, so this too was a relatively easy fix. To accommodate this, a fairly crude solution was devised, with the StuG IIIG superstructure mounted further back and a box-like protrusion added for the driver. Fittingly, this box was referred to as the cage by British reports. This did provide the benefit of allowing the driver to have a hatch located above him to get into and out of the vehicle, unlike the StuG IV. It shared the same 4-man crew made up of a driver, gunner, loader, and commander, as well as the 80mm frontal armor on the superstructure. The gun also remained the same StuG IV L48 as the StuG IIIG with 61 rounds. This design was shown to Hitler just days after the completion alongside 2 prototypes of the aforementioned Jagdpanzer IV and the Jagdpanzer 38T, which I covered in a video earlier this year. With approval from the Führer and a lofty order of 350 to be completed in December, the Krupp Grossenwerk began production at once. Unsurprisingly, less than 10% of that would actually be built by the end of the year as the factory transitioned to this new vehicle, with production peaking in February of 1944 at around 136 completed. These would continue to be built right up to the end of the war, with a final 3 built in April 1945 for a total of 1,141 built. For comparison, a total of around 10,000 StuG IIIs were built during the war. As already mentioned, the design was fairly basic and remained basically the same throughout production, but there were some changes made which are worth mentioning. Part of the difficulty in making improvements to the design came from the confusing nature of Panzer IV hull production. The book Sturmgeschuetz and its Variants notes that hull manufacturers didn't know if a hull was intended for the StuG IV until it was basically ready to ship. In one case, this led to a problem where the StuG IV production was seeking to add an additional 12-round ammo rack in the engine compartment. However, this same space on other Panzer IVs was to be filled by another fuel tank following the removal of powered traverse on the turreted models. The result of this was a compromise with a new design for the ammo rack only able to hold 8 rounds. Other small changes continued to be implemented during production, such as the reduction of return rollers from 4 on both sides to 3, which was to be done across all new Panzer IVs. Only a small number of StuG IVs appear to have been built with this reduced count, though. If you're interested to learn about the rest of the incremental improvements, check out the various sources linked in the description. I'd list them here, but as with most tanks, it would be a long segment discussing modified mufflers, tow hooks, and new gun travel locks, so not exactly thrilling subject matter. You may also notice in some photos, StuG IVs were up-armored using concrete poured onto the frontal armor. This was something seen on other tanks of the time, such as Shermans. However, similar to using track links as armor, this served more as a morale boost for the crew than actual additional protection. In many cases, the additional weight proved to be more detrimental to the tank than the minimal benefit, with reports from both sides discouraging crews from doing this. Additionally, some StuG IVs were coated with Zimrit paste to protect against magnetic anti-tank mines until the application of this was stopped later in the war. The first combat usage of the StuG IVs appears to have occurred sometime during or after February, with the first batch of them being sent out during that month. These were primarily issued in company strength, that being 14 tanks, to infantry divisions, as well as supplying artillery units in place of StuG IIIs. Some would also be given to Panzer units as well, with them being split between the Eastern, Western, and Italian fronts. This use would continue until the end of the war, with them seemingly performing as well as their Panzer III-based counterparts. No variants of the design appear to have been built, although at least one was converted into a dozer with a blade fitted and the gun removed. The primary issues suffered by the StuG IVs and their crews appear to not be anything related to the design, but rather simply the state of the German supply chain. One of the biggest complaints seems to be many of these missing their gun shields on the roof for the machine gun. This made suppressing fire against enemy infantry difficult by forcing the crew to instead fire high explosive shells, which proved less effective. Training was also an issue, with many StuG IVs being manned by or serving alongside inexperienced soldiers, which massively reduced the overall effectiveness of the unit. Still, these remained relatively well-protected and well-armed vehicles capable of supporting tanks and infantry, or destroying tanks themselves when necessary. Reportedly, in one case, the 394th StuG Brigade destroyed 26 enemy vehicles on August 6, 1944. This included 6 kills awarded to one StuG IV commanded by the commander of the 3rd Battery, who received the German Golden Cross for his efforts. As with other tanks and armored vehicles from 1944 onwards, the good performance of the StuG IVs didn't prevent them from being whittled away by either enemy fire, breakdowns, or being abandoned. These did certainly help fill the void left in StuG III production, but was it a mistake to do so? While they may not have had a choice, the fact remains that there were reasons why the previous StuG IV efforts failed, and those did not go away simply because of an emergency. The Germans were effectively cannibalizing Panzer IV production to keep StuG production limping along. Every StuG IV which left the factory was a hull that could have been used for a different Panzer IV variant, including the new Jagdpanzer IV that offered similar performance. Alternatively, one could argue the hulls were better spent building more of the StuG IVs, which utilized existing supply chains and parts, as well as being a proven and effective design. There's really no correct answer for this, as nothing would change the fact the war had been lost long before any of these vehicles got a taste of combat. Today, only a handful of the over 1,000 original StuG IVs remain, with 2 surviving in museums in Poland, 1 housed in Russia, and a 4th which made quite a journey after the war and currently resides in the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum. What do you think of the StuG IV though? Was it a good idea implemented too late, or a waste of resources better spent elsewhere? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to grab yourself a StuG IV set from my new store before they're gone. Thanks as always to my ConelyFans for their continued support of the channel, and to all of you for watching. If you enjoyed this one, I highly recommend checking out my previous episode on the Hetzer, which was another vehicle built in response to the lost StuG production. Hope to see you there, or in my next video.